What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the refreshed 2020 Honda Civic Si. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me with this great opportunity to come to Vegas here to review the refreshed 2020 Civic Si for you guys today. So about the refresh for the Civic Si here, well, I think they made some really nice changes to it. The main thing up front here is you can see that the LED headlights are now standard, and that's awesome. You know, the same headlights you get in the touring trims of the Civic as well as the Type R, and look much better than the traditional lights you had in the past. You also have new LED fog lamps there. Also, that front bumper has been redone, and you have the new colored pieces there. They kind of break up some of the black vents that you had before. Now, you know, it looks like vents, but they're blocked off for the most part. Here on the driver's side, it's actually where the new Honda sensing tech lies, and so that's something that's a new addition here for the Si for 2020, is the Honda sensing is now standard, and that's great. On the passenger side there's a little slit, but it doesn't really seem to be providing any visible cooling for anything, and so it gives a little bit of a unsymmetrical look up front there, because you have a slit in the one and then you don't have a slit in the other side. So otherwise though, you know, it's still cool to see the intercooler there hanging out behind the middle of the front bumper, and still a very attractive front end. I actually really like the way the Civic Si, you know, they have the black trim around the grille and stuff. I think it looks very good. Speaking of black components, you also have these new black wheels for 2020, and so that's something that is standard. There's just only these wheels. So if you don't like black wheels, you know, there's always the aftermarket, or you know, maybe a dealer option or something. But anyway, I think they look nice. They're 18 inches, and I personally think that they go well, especially here on this red car. Otherwise, the sides of the Si are the same here for both coupe and sedan. But going out to the back there's a restyled rear bumper there, which has again more of those colored inserts than what you usually got when it was just, you know, black plastic there. So that's a nice change. Otherwise though, it's basically the same out back there, but still good. You know, I still like how you have the dramatic tail lamps and the tasteful little lip spoiler there, which looks good. And so overall, I think, you know, they again nicely sharpened up the front here a little bit without making any drastic changes. Again, it's just a refresh, and so overall I think it's a nice improvement.
Right, for the interior of the Civic Si. So this is the sedan one that we're in, but the interior is basically the same aside from the larger back seat you get here in the sedan between it and the coupe. But anyway, a few nice changes here for the interior for 2020. First off, we still have the same great shape of the seats here you get in the Si, which are a smooth cloth and feel really nice and comfortable, and also very supportive with great bolstering for both the torso and the thighs. But you do have this new pattern here with this like a checkered carbon fiber looking you know, material here with the red, and I think that's actually kind of helps it to stand out a little bit nicer, and I really like the design of these seats, and like I said, super comfortable as well. Next is the steering wheel, which is the same great wheel. It's fantastic with a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches. It's just a really great wheel. Only a few buttons here on it. They nicely have simplified these wheels here with this new gen Civic over the past, you know, 4 or 5 years here, and I really like the way this is set up. Now that Honda sensing is standard, you also have those buttons added on, you know, for the adaptive cruise and stuff on the steering wheel. But again, still very uncluttered, and it's refreshing comparing it to some other vehicles that have, you know, just a ton of buttons on the steering wheel. So a really nice setup there. Gauges here in the Civic Si are the same as they have been in the past few years, but that's a great thing. You know, the Civic was one of the first to have standard digital gauges here in, you know, one of these vehicles in this class, and so I love that display there. It gives you just all the information you want. You know, it's very customizable, where you can have the boost gauge showing, which I very much appreciate, even throttle position, G-meter, lap timers, all those types of things can be displayed in there. Also, if you want to show your audio or something, that's also an option, and I really like the way that display is set up. Even you can have a shift light there if you want to be really sporty, and I love these gauges. I think they're fantastic. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, one of the things you'll notice is you have this red trim up on the top of the dash here by the vents. That's a new addition, and that's really the only other new addition here for the interior, but you do have a volume knob, which is also another notable thing that Honda's been slowly reintroducing here in many of their models, and so great that the Civic Si now has a volume knob and a few hard buttons here as well. As far as this infotainment system is concerned, you know, it's an okay system. It's not the fastest, so this footage you're seeing here isn't sped up or slowed down, so when I'm transitioning from menus and turning on the radio and things, there is a little bit of a second or two delay compared to some other better systems that other manufacturers use. I really was hoping they were going to put the new Honda infotainment system you get in the Accord and stuff. I was hoping that was going to make its way into this. Unfortunately, we're still stuck with the, you know, same system, but it still does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is great. satellite radio. No navigation here for the SIs, but I don't think anyone's going to be too worried about that. Then you have your basic climate controls and heated seats, which are also standard here in the SI, which is great. You have just a couple buttons here on the shifter, but I do wish that you didn't have so many blank buttons. You have, you know, it would have been nice to have one large sport button instead of 3 buttons and only one of them works. But the shifter here in this area is really great too. I love the shifters, and I'll talk more about that when I get out on the road. Storage space in the SI is also actually probably best in class, I think. It is so good. First in the doors, you have a nice large pocket with a bottle holder. Coming over to the center here. First up top here, you have a good space that you can, you know, fit a smartphone or something, lay it down in there, and you'll see this little pass-through for your cords because your jacks and everything are actually in this lower area here. And it's not too hard to get to or anything, so I like that they're kind of out of the way there, and that's where you'll find a USB jack and a traditional power outlet. Now, this little lower area here, you can fit a good amount of things in there still, but it isn't as spacious as it is in the automatic transmission versions of the normal Civic, and that's just because you have an actual manual shift linkage here, so they needed to block some of that off to have that connected, but still great to have an additional space there. You'll also have a really good amount of space here with your cup holders, and that slides forwards and backwards to reveal another USB jack and another really tall bottle holder, so if you want to move this out of the way and have a massive bottle in there, you could have it in there without it really getting in the way of the shifter, which is great. You also have this little center armrest, and while it's nice to have the center armrest, it is kind of this rough material for this cloth. I wish this cloth was softer, smoother, and it's got a little bit of padding and give to it, but it's still a little firmer than I would personally like, and so just an interesting thing to note there. But anyway, you can open that up, and then you'll see another little tray for coins and things like that, and another little additional tray behind that as well. But anyway, you can slide those, and you'll see just, again, a massive cubby here. I mean, there's a lot of family crossovers that have less storage space than you get here in the Civic. Its overall storage space is a 10 out of 10 in the Civic, like it has been the past few years. Backseat space is also very impressive here, especially in the Civic Si Sedan. So, yeah, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I easily have about 3 to maybe 4 inches of legroom to spare back there. Very spacious for a vehicle of this class, though. You know, a good amount of headroom as well. And they're pretty soft, comfortable seats too. Again, more of that smooth cloth. You'll see pockets in those doors. And there is also a fold-down center armrest too, so that's great to have all of that. Trunk space is also very good here in the Civic, especially for the sedan version. I mean, it's a nice, wide, and a very long space. And you can even fold down the rear seats there if you want even more space. But I mean, it's a very large trunk and right on par with a lot of even mid-sized sedans. It's a very good size. Beneath the floor there, you will see a couple little slots and a, you know, little spare tire, a fix-a-flat kind of kit, but there isn't any actual spare tire beneath the floor there or anything. But good to have the mobility kit, I guess, at least, and a little bit of extra space there. But overall, I don't think anyone's going to really complain about the trunk space here in the Civic. It's pretty good. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Civics here still have the standard Honda key. This one has this stripe on it, but that's just for the program we're on here. But some nice buttons on the back. I always appreciate how it's a small, slender, and just very compact key. With a lot of other keys ballooning in size these days, I really like Honda's key, and I hope they stick with it. And so, of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So just leave the key in your pocket, put the clutch in, hit the engine start button, and it quietly starts up. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Honda Civic Si Sedan. So, first thing I think that I notice here about it is that, you know, you have some rev hang, and that's something that's more pronounced to me in Hondas. Other vehicles have this issue as well, like the WRX and vehicles like that, but it's always a little bit more pronounced this, where I'm always struggling to be smooth in between shifts, because it's like the RPMs go up another 500 RPMs as I let off the gas, and then trying to go into the next gear, it's always a little mismatched. And so that's just something that's probably, you know, something you can learn after a while. And there are tunes, I think, to minimize that a little bit, but I wish that Honda with the refresh here would have maybe, you know, worked on that rev hang a little bit. And so you still have that. Other things though, visibility is also excellent here in the Civic Si. It's always been excellent. You know, you have nice thin A-pillars, nice large windows, view out of the back is great. A very easy car to daily drive in that regard. It's also pretty refined too. So you have stuff like the Corolla, which has more road noise, but also feels a little bit lighter. Then you have this, and then you have stuff like the new Mazda 3, which is, you know, nearing luxury car levels of refinement, but you also have a little bit of extra weight with those. But overall, the Civic is a very nice middle ground and very nice and refined. But, you know, so couple things that are new here for the driving experience for 2020. First is there's a 6% shorter final drive ratio. So I think it goes from a 410 gear to like a 4.3 or so. And so that gives you, a little bit more pep in all the gears. And so that's one of the new things. There's also an active sound management now that you have. And so I'm guessing that kind of uses the speakers to help, pipe things in. And it doesn't sound massively different to me, at least in the lower RPMs. What I think I've noticed is that whenever you go to the higher RPMs, it sounds maybe like there's a little bit more going on there. I'm not sure. I can't really tell a difference myself. But, that's one of the new additions is the active sound management. But we'll go ahead and put it in the sport mode while we're on these back roads here. And so you do have adaptive dampers here in the SI. That's something that they've had for, since the SI of this generation debuted. But it's really nice because, it's only 2 modes, but, it'll kind of firm things up a little bit. I will say the difference isn't massive. So it's not a standout feature in my opinion. One of the more important features, I think, is you have a mechanical limited slip differential, very similar to the Type R. And so that'll help you put down power better than some of the competitors which don't have a mechanical LSD. And so I think sport mode, if you can hear that slight change in tone, I think that might be what's going on. And it does sound better. I think it's an improvement in the sound. And I actually like the way that sounds. It's getting better. It's not as awesome as the previous gen Civic Si with its naturally aspirated screamer of an engine, but this is a step in the right direction in my opinion. And I do like the way that sounds. Other things here with the SI. So, those are really the main 2 differences, but other things, the SIs have always been a very good handling vehicle. And so I think one of the main things you notice, especially if you're coming out of a normal Civic, is that you have heavier steering, much heavier steering. Even like the Sport hatch has really light steering, and it gives the car a very darty, light feeling to the whole vehicle in general. And I think the heavier steering in this is what always makes me feel like the Civic Si is heavier than it actually is. Because the coupe only weighs 2,889 pounds, and the sedan's only 17 pounds more, so just barely over 2,900 pounds. A very light vehicle for all the safety and all the tech and everything that you have in these. And even now you have Honda Sensing as standard, and that's included in that curb weight. And that stuff, weighs a few pounds as well. And even with all that stuff, I'm noticing that, it feels light, but it's just the heavier steering gives you a very planted feel. So it doesn't feel as darty as the Sport hatch. I will say I do kind of miss the lighter steering from the Sport hatch. And it just gives this a little bit of a weightier feel. So, I would probably pick a Sport hatch as an autocross car, but for backroads driving like this, it is nice to have the planted handling here of the SI, and it handles very well. So this one has the optional summer tires, which is only a $200 option to get from Honda. It's basically the only option you can get from Honda on the SI, and so they're nice. They're not the best summer tires. They're Goodyear Eagle F1s, but they're 235 wide, which is a tiny bit wider than what you sometimes get with some of the competitors that run 225s. And so, plenty of grip. I haven't had any wheel spin or anything like that. It's been very planted. One of the things, that I've been trying to pick up on here is the shorter gearing. And it's been a few years since I've been in an SI that was stock. So as far as the gearing goes, it's not a wild difference. I'm not like, wow, this feels so much faster than before. But it is, I think, a little bit peppier. Actually, the biggest thing that I've noticed was out on the highway. You kind of have a little bit of exhaust drone now on the highway, more so than I guess either realized or recognized back whenever I did my 2017 review with the older gearing. And that's because, again, you have shorter gearing. So 6th gear, you're going to be at a higher RPM in this than you are in a 2019 or earlier. And so, and when you're in the higher speeds, getting close to 80 miles an hour on the highway and stuff, it's, over 3,000 RPMs, and it's a little boomy, but that's it is nice because you have more passing power, and I think that's why Honda did it. They said that some customers didn't want to downshift to 5th, and so you leave it in 6th, and you have all the passing power you need on the highway now. So that is nice. I personally don't mind downshifting, or, you know, they could have done something to have a shorter final drive, but then just make 6th a little bit taller, or something like that, so you have the increased peppiness, but also the better highway cruising. But, you know, they just decided to do the final drive, which is a simpler solution, and I think it's fine as long as you don't mind fuel economy. So fuel economy did drop by 2 mpg in every metric, which is an interesting thing. You know, most car makers are trying to make things more and more efficient, and I actually respect Honda for being like, you know what, we'll take a 2 mpg hit to give the extra peppiness and you know, help this to feel a little sportier. I really respect them for being willing to do that, and so for that reason, I'm, you know, very happy they have the shorter final drive, and I wish that was a change that other manufacturers would make. So many vehicles, they're just chasing higher horsepower, trying to find other ways to make things faster, and it's so easy just to do a, you know, shorter gearing. I think the more that I'm kind of cruising in sport mode here, coming up this mountain road, is where it does sound a little bit more like the old Civic Si, which I appreciate. Because as much as I like the Civic Si, I still do miss the old Si and its engine. This engine just doesn't have the same character that you get with you know, the older Sis. But you know, you have much better safety, much better tech in these new ones, much more refined, bigger, more usable, better in every way aside from the engine, I think, and the transmission. The transmission was also more direct in the previous gen than it is in this. But yeah, so I mean, really the main thing that's very impressive though about these is the pricing still. So even with the sport hatchbacks, you know, those are starting close to $25 now these days as well, and this is actually $25,000 exactly before destination. When you include destination, you're just under 26. It's $930 for that destination fee, and so still at under $26,000, it's a lot of car. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. A little bit of turbo lag. All right, chirp the tires there. Okay, so, you know, whenever you're full throttle, it's not too bad with the rev hang. So it's mostly just the lower RPMs where, you know, you kind of have to get used to it a little bit. But yeah, so pretty good power. So that is one thing that hasn't changed for 2020 here. You're still running the 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It does 205 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. And so 0 to 60 time for these, I think, is in the high 6-second range. I think Motor Trend most recently tested one and got 6.6 seconds 0 to 60. Now, we weren't provided any official 0 to 60 times from Honda for the new shorter final drive. I'm not sure if that's going to make much of a difference or not, but it could be a little bit quicker because of that new shorter final drive. So that's, you know, something to maybe keep in mind, but it's not going to be a drastic difference. So you know, it's quick enough and it's fun. I think the more that I drive this, the more that I think I'm picking up on that active sound enhancement thing, but it does sound better than they used to, and I think it gives the engine a little more character, but it still is just not as much character as previous gen Civic Si again, or even the new Type R. And obviously there's a $10,000 difference between this and the Type R, so that's a big leap to make. But if you can make that leap, I certainly think that the Type R is much more exciting. The shifter is really good. Those don't have as much rev hang, and the shifter is a lot more precise. Not that this shifter is bad. The shifter actually feels great, and I love its action. It's just the, you know, the little bit of a delay with the throttle and the rev hang, because that is one thing. Throttle response, I mean, part of it is because you're waiting for the turbo, but it just doesn't feel precise at all. And especially, again, with previous Hondas in the past having razor sharp throttle response. You breathed on the previous gen SI throttle and you got response. This, I mean, whether I'm 75% throttle, 25% throttle, makes very little difference, you know, in these, whenever you're at the, you know, lower RPMs and the higher gears. But even if, you know, you were to go down, rev matching's pretty easy, so that is one nice thing. But even if we go down to second here, and there it is. Like, you can see, I mean, from the time I go full throttle to, and you can see how much it's hanging while I have the clutch in. It's like, it's just not precise, and that's unusual for Honda. You know, in the past they were so precise, and so that is just one thing that I'm kind of missing here a little bit with with these new SIs. And that's, again, these are things that have carried over from the older ones from 2015 or 2017 and earlier. But I still just, I wish, while they were working on this car for the refresh, I wish that was something they would have given attention to in addition to the final drive, and kind of just made things a little bit sharper. But one thing I will say is brakes they feel really good. They are very, very responsive, feel pretty stout brakes as well for, again, a vehicle in this class. Yeah, this still it feels like it wants to push a little bit more than what you get with some of the competitors sometimes. So that's the one thing, like, some of the main competitors. I think, to me, the one that stands out as being one of the strongest competitors is the Veloster Turbo, if you're considering a Civic Si Coupe. Obviously, if you want the practicality of 4 doors, the Veloster is kind of funky with its 3-door thing, but isn't really a good competitor to the 4-door. But if you're okay with the 2-door or the Veloster setup, I think the Veloster, for a few $1,000s less, is just as fast feeling, has lighter and more precise handling, it has less rev hang, and just overall feels a little more fun to drive and a little more engaging than this does. You also have better grip. Those have Michelin Pilot Super Sports, I believe, or the 4S, but it has those really sticky Michelins, which are great. You have the B&M shifter in those, which feels really good in the R-Spec version of the Veloster Turbo, at least. And so getting one of those for $22,000, is I think one of the biggest competitors to this vehicle. Other competitors, you go up the pricing ladder a little bit. You have stuff like the Volkswagen GLI, the new one, and those are, a little bit, a couple thousand more, and obviously you can load those up with a bunch of luxury features you can't with the Si. Also, those offer an automatic. Same with the Veloster Turbo as well. Elantra Sport is also, loosely based on the same platform as the Veloster, and that's another 4-door competitor to this. And that now, unfortunately, is only the dual clutch. So if you're a manual lover, the Elantra Sport isn't an option anymore unless you're willing to go in the used market. And so those, I think, have a little bit of a lighter handling feel as well, but you're just feeling like you're in a cheaper interior. You have less refinement in the Elantra Sport. And so if you're okay with that, then that could also be a very compelling thing, because, in those, you can get like heated and cooled seats and the leather or leatherette or whatever that they use. And, those types of features, even if it isn't as luxurious of a feel with, just the materials and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, Honda is really punching towards the top of the pack as far as the interior materials. Still not as good as the new Mazda 3 or anything like that, but, still nice nonetheless. So, those are some of the main competitors. Another competitor, though, is a WRX. Now, the WRX, for only about $2,000 more or so, you get all-wheel drive and you get an extra 60 horsepower, plus just as much room as you have here in the Si sedan. And I think that's why WRXs continue to sell so well, because it is such a strong value proposition. And now, obviously, the WRX, that's a bare bones interior. Like, you don't get heated seats in a base WRX, so you're gonna have to go up closer to 30 grand for one of those. And again, then that's where you kind of get into a more competitive price segment. So I think keeping this at 25 and limiting the options that you can get on these, basically just summer tires or no summer tires, and that's really the only option you have, I think that kind of preserves the value of the Si. And I think at that $25,000 price point, it is still a very strong competitor. You also have all that new safety tech that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So that's having Honda Sensing as standard is awesome, because you have adaptive cruise control. Now, obviously, that won't work for stop and go stuff like it does in the automatic versions. But with this, I'm assuming it disengages at a certain speed and you have to put the clutch in. But at highway speeds, having adaptive cruise with the active lane keep assist, Honda does one of the best lane keep assist systems, in my opinion. I tested it extensively in the Accord Sport, and so that's really well done. So having that here is a huge improvement to the Civic Si for 2020 here, and definitely one of the main selling points, especially if you do a lot of highway driving. That's a really nice inclusion to have here. And so overall, it's a nice improvement here and a nice little refresh for the Civic Si. But I'm hoping for the all-new version, several years down the road, that they, make it a more character-filled engine, a little sharper throttle, all those types of things I think would go a long way to making this feel a little more exciting. If you can stretch go for the Type R. The Type R is fantastic, not only at its price point, but at any price point. It is just one of the best handling vehicles you can get for any money. It's so good. And you get the hatch practicality in that, which you're unfortunately still unable to get here in the SI. But anyway, so those are about all my thoughts here on the Civic Si. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thanks once again to Honda for providing me with this opportunity. And thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.